I would like to welcome Cinny Little to the Customer Summit. If there is an A-list celebrity in the competitive intelligence discipline, it would be Cinny Little. She is the author of the famous Forrester Wave on competitive intelligence platforms, which has become the go-to document in the industry for companies that are looking for vendors to send RFPs to for competitive intelligence. Cinny is well qualified to be an industry guru. Her experience includes being a VP of Digitas in the wild early days of the internet around 1995 when all of this stuff was being invented for the first time. She was a regional president of agency.com, where she ran a team of 165 business strategists, creatives, and software engineers. She was a senior vice president of product management at Pearson Education Technology. She was the director of digital product management at Boston Scientific, which is one of the leading device manufacturers, instrument manufacturers. She was the head of business strategy and customer insights. How's that? Business strategy, competitive intelligence, and customer insights, market research at MilliporeSigma. And then she became the principal analyst at Forrester for business insights. At Forrester, she focuses on optimizing process and human skills that help companies change ways of working to drive more value from data and insights from business, customers, and employees. Her research agenda includes organization development, change management, innovation, best practices, leadership development, vendor evaluation, and competitive intelligence. Cinny, welcome to our conference, and I will turn the podium over to you.
Goodness gracious. Well, thank you very much, David. It's a delight to be here with all of you today to speak about market and competitive intelligence, amazingly, after David's introduction there, and how to drive more actions and value from the work. That's what we're going to focus on today, and I'm looking forward to questions and discussion as we go along. So let's get started. So here's the overall agenda. Firms must continue to change their ways of working. I'm speaking generally now, and then we're going to deep dive. Change their ways of working to drive more decisions and actions that matter from data and insights. Market and competitive intelligence, and I call it M&CI. And why do I call it market and competitive intelligence? Because different folks and firms and companies call it different things. So I just use both market and competitive intelligence. It seems to work best. So you can apply it to whatever you call this function in your firm. And we'll look at key ways of working by experts, professionals in M&CI work that come from interviews that I've had with them, both practitioners and a couple of consultants and other experts in there. And that's really the data, if you will, that I'm going to use to talk about what we're talking. But first, some basic groundwork. As you see in this photo, there's a disconnect. The bridge is broken, which means that traffic can't get where it needs to get from place to place. So people can't, so deliveries can't, nothing can, and anything that needs doing that required this bridge previously takes more time and more money to get done. Well, that's exactly what happens with data. Data matters to everyone's work. And just so you know, every time I say that little four-letter word, data, I mean quantitative, qualitative, knowledge, information, or evidence even, those three things that are valid. That's what I mean by data every time I say it. So it matters to everyone's work, whatever the role, on the data to insight side of the table, if you will, and the decision maker side of teams that have accountabilities for business and operations areas, matters to everyone's work. But what's happening is there's a disconnect between the data and insights and the decision making that matters. Not enough decision making is being made. And what we have here at Forrester is the notion of what we call an insights-driven business. That's a business that uses insights from data to make decisions that matter to customers and to business and operations area everywhere in the firm, but there are relatively few of them. So why do you have to worry about this disconnect between data and insights and decisions that matter? Because there are many, these are just a few that Forrester data shows, many business benefits that if you make more decisions are advanced in being an insights-driven business than if you are a beginner. So these are just a few of the business benefits, somewhat randomly picked by me. So as I said, an advanced insights-driven business uses data to deliver insights that we act on about the customer experiences that matter most to our business outcomes everywhere in the firm. I am not talking about the customer experience group here when I say that. You know what I mean. No matter how far away you are from specific interaction with customers in a firm, everything we're doing is for our customers. One piece of data, one chart I wanted to show you too is this interesting chart. The dark blue shows the advanced level of being insights driven. As I mentioned before, that means makes decisions everywhere in the firm with data. Green is intermediate, beginner is dark, is the darker green. And it's interesting to see that for those firms that are more advanced in insights-driven ways of working, they are doing much more of implementing and currently expanding their market and competitive intelligence analytics, which is quite interesting. It shows us that if you are working the way of an insights-driven business to apply more insights from more data, you're doing more work in those areas too. And it's obviously having a good cycle of value being delivered. So I wanted to show you that specific area. By the way, the folks that are surveyed for this survey, we call them data and analytics technology decision makers, but they sit in a broad range of areas in the firms. This is not IT people only, if you will. So this data does apply to you as well. So employees struggle or fail to find insights and information that they need and can apply to their work. And the disconnect there is not data or technology's fault. I'm not going to go through all the details on this slide, but technology in all areas, including market and competitive intelligence technology, is continuously broadening and strengthening its data management capabilities, its ability for people to get insights even when they're not technical in nature, the breadth of natural language generation and querying, the cognitive UI that anybody can use, user interface that anyone can use, and the ability also to push things to us that address, I don't know what I don't know. All of those things are there, and still that disconnect is there. Continued investment in data and technology and decision-making not going up much. Some folks talk about data democratization. That's the answer. It is not. It's simply a means to an end. It is not an end point. More data to more people? Yeah. With insights and more people able to use them? Absolutely. But just democratizing the data without that full cycle doesn't help. So, and I'm almost done with my introduction. Go get a cup of coffee if you've fallen asleep already. The biggest challenges here are at the front and back end of that data to insights to actions value chain. We need to know what problem or opportunity, that top item there, we're working on in order to be able to provide value, period. And a lot of times in this line of work, market and competitive intelligence, and indeed many other kinds of insights work, we feel that's not our job when we sit on that side of the table, but it is. And that's the fundamental stuff that I wanted to present to you to help you see where we're going here. And this last introduction slide is we have to think about the fact that a team's success, your team's success in the work you do in market and competitive intelligence requires this full skills and talent mix, data and or technology skills, wherever those sit in the firm and whatever they mean in the line of work, and the business and operation skills, the decision makers that are going to be depending on what we do. And then there's the human skills. We under focus on those human skills, the ways of working that help us drive more value from the work. So there's my groundwork for where I want to dig in to M&CI. We will talk about technology a bit too, but we're going to talk mostly about the ways of working and how to apply them, and how you may see where you are already applying them and places where maybe you had not.
So I have a couple of questions. Some of the audience might as well, and feel free for the audience to jump in.
Please.
But one thing that I noticed you on one of your slides, you said you were talking about trends, anomalies, and predictions. Mm-hmm. And I think that I can easily see how one can use knowledge management systems to track trends and anomalies, but predictions in CI is very hard. Usually when we think about predictive analytics, we're saying if a customer looks at this page on the website, there's a 28% chance they'll buy something, but if they look at that page, there's a 37% chance. So when we hit the 28% guy, let's give them some more information to try to bump that up. That's what predictive analytics usually is. It's predicting the actions of an individual exposed to stimulus. But for CI, how do you predict a competitor's strategy using tools as opposed to human intelligence?
I should probably have said this may not apply to all technology segments, because it doesn't, as you say. It applies in very different ways to different segments.
We get that question in RFP sometimes. What is your predictive analytics solution for CI? I don't know what to say, because you have to say something on an RFP. But okay, I had another question. What was the criteria that established beginner, intermediate, and advanced in terms of your use?
Sure. So I hope I'm going to answer the question when I say that we have Forrester has a 20-question assessment that asks 4 questions on each of the areas, 4 questions on each of the 5 areas that we look at that enable an insights-driven business: strategy, data, technology, people, process. So 4 questions on each one of those 5 areas. And that is the source of the data that we use for that analysis. So broad.
Can you give us a hint as to what some of the questions might be, or what distinguishes?
Oh, I don't have them sitting in front of me. I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
Okay, so that was it for now. Okay, very good. Now we're going to dig into market and competitive intelligence. And there are a lot of different areas in which M&CI sit, of course, with remits that vary from fairly siloed to more broad. And you know that well, of course. And there's no right or wrong there, as long as value is being delivered to from the insights from the data. So I'm going to dig into questions, answers that folks give me when I ask questions to them, and vice versa. I'm actually going to be reading out a lot of quotations from clients, mainly, not all of them, but people that I interview about the work to learn more myself. And that came from questions that clients ask me most about market and competitive intelligence in general. What's an effective strategy? What do other firms' M&CI functions look like? What are the best M&CI solutions for collaboration, for battle cards, for knowledge management, for data, for other things, for whatever it is they're interested in? And I'm not going to go into that, the best solutions piece. But as you can imagine, those are the questions that people ask. And what options or recommendations for technology platforms are there to automate M&CI work? And again, I'm not going to speak about specifics there, but I'll speak about the broad themes, if you will. So let's dig in. So I'm going to talk about a few areas here and using these quotations. And the first is the bottom line of market and competitive intelligence work, literally. So first quotation from an M&CI lead in a software company. M&CI's work, I put M&CI in everybody's mouths just so that it would be normalized across these quotations. M&CI's work can't just be tactical. We must have strategic influence. And then here are two quotations from an M&CI lead who works with the senior executive team in a global technology company. His team does. The most important part of the job is how we synthesize and put together meaningful communications from the work that we do. Our job is not to just gather intel and analyze it, it's to drive change. And then many of you must know or have heard of Ben Gilad, the founder of the Academy of Competitive Intelligence, of course. And he always has amazing quotations. He's so much fun to interview. He said, one reason for failure of competitive intelligence work is there was no value delivered. Well, that's pretty straightforward. So again, I'm going to be reading these quotations to you and just helping you find what is meaningful for you in that. So that's the approach I decided to take with this. So that's the bottom line. Next up is something I get asked about all the time as well, forming and growing a team. How do we do that? What's the best way to do it? And here are some quotations from I've interviewed Eric Glittman as well, but I happen to use these quotations from a webinar that he did for the Society for Competitive Intelligence Professionals, or SCIP, on setting up the CI function. He said, there's no ideal size for an M&CI unit, but it needs to be right-sized per the value it's delivering. That seems kind of logical, but people do swing around. Companies do swing around on that sometimes. You may have a team that's horribly overwhelmed in the work that you're being asked to do, and you are delivering value. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is people aren't doing enough, and good things don't result from that in the long run. He also said no CI unit will survive without senior leadership support. That's pretty clear. Senior being whatever that level would be relevant to where this team sits. And then Eric said something has to drive validity. If the CI folks are producing stuff no one uses, the team typically won't survive more than 3 years or through a change of leadership. He's seen that again and again, and he, like me, has gray hair, so he knows about these things. How should you prioritize what you work on? And again, these are things that people ask me all the time, so I ask professionals about it, and they give me their answers. How you prioritize what to work on? Well, these are quotes from various different industries, geographies in many cases, all of them, of course, M&CI professionals. You should have 4 to 6 major initiatives that are mapping to what's visibly important. Some will be related to optimizing business as usual, others to innovation or foresight, disruptive forces, what's changing, and how to act on that. So a mix in this particular team's approach and remit, if you will. Always be looking at what does this mean for us, and how will we respond to this change? So again, this is from a different person, really focusing on the change we need to drive. And gosh, we know how hard that is, right? And the C-suite is the ultimate audience for our work. And that came up in pretty much every organization I spoke to, ultimately, of course. Then let's dive into human skills that people talked about without much prompting from me, the ways of working that people have to use in order to drive value from what they do. So here's somebody who said, when I think about the people who are most successful, it's almost always people who in one way or another had a consulting background, not content curation skills. You certainly need that mix. And when this person was speaking, he didn't necessarily mean that the consulting background is working for, one of the big 4 or 6 or whatever number you prefer to use there, but a way of working within a firm. And that's what he meant by that one. Evolution has shifted M&CI from delivering reports and data to being a change agent using data and information, which is an interesting way to look at it, I think. The required skills are a 3-legged stool, well-rounded combination of strong analytical, communication, and relationship building skills. and the necessity of having really good networks in and outside of your company. And this last quotation is from a woman I interviewed at a consumer technology product company, where she was very focused on different strengths that team members had. She liked to have a mix of diversity in a range of ways, including the skill sets that they had, because they work with lots of different areas in that large firm. I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, there's the communication aspect that we need. Ben Gilad, once again, we teach M&CI pros how to get interest from management. They're not allowed to talk about information, only impact. That's a part of some of the coursework that one can do at the academy. And we need to find someone in our M&CI team who has the respect of the top management and make them the person that does the briefings for the decision makers that we're working with. Then additional quotes from other people. Resilience is critical. We have an interesting job. We're working to bring in the hard truth from our competitors. That makes for some difficult conversations. You know that. And I like to define myself resilience that it looks like this. We say together within the team, obviously, we tried it and it didn't work. And by golly, we're going to try it again with great enthusiasm, as hard as it is to have to keep coming back at it. It's a line of work that requires really good skills in this. And then last, I have the how to measure and report the impact of M&CI. It is not an out-of-the-box thing. Just counting clicks in a platform is useful, but it isn't the be-all and the end-all. It's all about, and it's certainly not about project delivery, which some people use as a way of measuring it. It's all about identifying, or actually the second quote is a way a specific team, an M&CI team in a large technology company works to do this, to measure and report the impact of their work. They identify the X, whatever it is, most important decisions they helped make, the firm made in the past year, for instance, and then discuss among themselves what role they had in influencing each decision, or, if possible, the outcome of the decision. And yes, this is soft work. It's not quantitative work. And then they determine a percent and have of how they contributed, and have an opinion on what a good percent would be, and then rate themselves and talk to the executives that they work with about that. I think that's a really interesting way of doing it. Are people going to push back and say, how do you know this is right and this isn't good enough and yada yada? Sure. But it's a way of getting towards aligning on where the work has actually had an effect. And then the bottom one is a way to approach things, which I'm sure you all already do, questions to ask of your stakeholders about measurement value. Obviously, a tick or a few ticks down from what the folks you're helping are doing. Are any of the following relevant regarding actions that have been taken from the M&CI insights? And I'm sure you do this, but just using those basic approaches is really important. And even what we have learned that we didn't know can be a really important thing to measure. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about the value of M&CI platforms overall. From what I see. And this is not meant to be encyclopedic. I've just picked the things that I talk about most with clients and hear about most. The highest value comes from being the one place to go. Having SharePoint, it might be the one place to go, but it's a place where you can actually find something, an M&C platform. Whereas unless you have full-time developers working on your SharePoint, you're not going to have that. So that's the highest value, the one place to go. And then continuously growing in importance, very much so since I first did my work on this category, if you will, of technology in 2019, first published it in 2019, had been working on it for a while before that, is integrating, including bi-directionally, with tools, as I always say, where people live in their organization, such as Salesforce, Slack, Teams, Tableau, Jira. You can name the ones that are relevant to your own firms. That bi-directional aspect, it can differ by roles in a firm. With sales, it totally has to be bi-directional. It may, if it's a Jira thing as well. But that's really, really growing stronger and stronger in importance. The ability for users, and also this was already a thing, it's become much more of a thing. The ability for specific types of users, executives and sales coming first, to both view and contribute where relevant intel via mobile from the field, maybe a trade show, etc. And then, of course, the artificial intelligence and machine learning matter. Here's what we're working to do to take repeatable work, especially with machine learning, repeatable work out of it that doesn't take the time of the users, and artificial intelligence to do things for me that can make a lot of difference in functions and features on a platform, such as searching and finding what we want to find, summarizations, decide what's important to whom based on what we're seeing, meaningful proactive alerts. They may not all be always be perfect, but they're often almost always better than not having that. Elimination of duplicative content, reuse of knowledge assets, and give me what I need where I am, based on what device or system I'm using. However, even with all the technology, and as I said, I was only going to speak to that briefly. I'm happy to try to answer any questions to talk about it more. It's the human element that remains and will remain critical, giving input to train the AI and machine learning, but up-leveling the human aspect of it, the ability to get those strong relationships with stakeholders and decision makers and help them know how you can help them more. Have that consulting mindset instead of a, quote, delivery mindset. I'm using extremes just as an example. That's the kind of thing that needs to happen within the M&CI line of work altogether. So key takeaways for you. To continue growing the value of your work, stack the deck with strategic pilots. So if there are different areas in the firm or different product area, different functional area, different region, whatever that means in your team's work, always be trying to grow the value of the M&CI work and do a strategic pilot, even if you have to munge data by hand and stuff to show people how it will work. And then create some baseline numbers for key performance indicators you'll use to measure value of your work. Yes, it's hard. It's brutally hard, but work on it and try it. Think about that approach that team in the large technology company used. It's something to consider, and you could switch it, change it around a little bit to use yourself. Do not neglect the human skills in the ways that we talked about them, and know that you'll need to continuously invest time in changing the way you and your stakeholders work. That's what this line of work is all about, right? So with that, boom, we're good. And based on today's presentation, what are you going to do differently starting tomorrow? Hell, starting today. Why not?
Cindy, I have a question for you. You mentioned the importance of field intelligence, and I have to say that is the missing content set in many of our platforms that we provide. We have great business news. We have wonderful subscription research from people like Forrester and Informa and Mintel and Kantar. We can social media. We aggregate from Twitter. We have journal databases where they're relevant to competitive intelligence, which is very significant actually in the life sciences arena, say. But we don't have field intelligence in most of our platforms, and it is a hard organizational and technical problem to get field intelligence. We do have one client that is collecting field intelligence with an app that we provide that carries on a structured interview with the person and can upload a photograph of a document or something like that. But generally speaking, we don't have the field intelligence piece. Could you comment on how important it is, and is it, and what solutions have you seen? It's a hard technical and organizational behavior problem to collect field intelligence.
I think, as always in these kinds of conversations, one has to define what we mean by field intelligence, and then parse that down to what it means to a specific function. So with respect to sales, I think B2B sales primarily, B2B sales. With respect to sales, that's relatively well-oiled approach, but to your point, there aren't great technologies for collecting it in the moment. I am seeing that begin to change with some solutions depending on the industries that they serve, and depending on the use cases. Is it sales enablement, or is it in the life sciences industry such as pharma and med device? The incredible importance of the trade shows and other shows they go to where they learn from each other. Because of the nature of that industry, it's hard to find public information, and you learn a lot from those. Yeah. So that's an area that I've seen multiple M&CI solutions looking at that happen to have pretty robust client bases or customer bases in those areas. Beyond that, I haven't tried to those use cases I just spoke about. I haven't really seen or been looking for other use cases, I have to admit.
Back on the strategic influence, and something that we always suggest to clients, and I don't think many have followed this suggestion or found it practical. And so I would love to get your thoughts on it, Cindy, and also from the group. And that is the idea of a personal dashboard for an executive that would, where the head of CI could visit with the executive and could say, what are you worrying about? What keeps you awake at night? And then build a dashboard in the platform that is restricted to him or her to use, where the information is being tracked that is relevant to the issues of that person. Our platform would make it easy to do a personal dashboard. What do you think of that idea as a way of elevating your strategic influence, or does it feel like it's a little bit too much in the information curation department?
Well, there are a bunch of dynamics there. I think high level, I'd want to separate out the insights that could potentially be delivered to an executive that wanted them, and how they would be delivered. I think it would be, in most cases, in my opinion, not something an executive would want to have to go to a separate tool for, even no matter how valuable it was. And that's easy to fix, sticking it into whatever they do live in, Teams or whatever.
Right.
Yep. I think that there would definitely be themes about how executives might like that, but I don't think every executive wants that. We all know when we give presentations to executives, we have to titrate the level of detail that we give, because some executives will jump over the virtual, in these days, table at you when you don't have enough detail, and others will be, you'll see them, going back to their typing when you're giving too much. So I think it's a tough thing to solve for, David, but it's certainly, having an executive dashboard that can be shareable with through other solutions, I think would be something to think about.
Cindy, you mentioned KPIs, and I find this to be one of the hardest problems, because we would like to measure ROI on our platform, and we get driven into things we can measure as opposed to things we care about. we can measure the number of users. We can measure the number of documents downloaded. We can measure the number of user sessions. And so that's what we base our ROI methodology on. We actually have this wonderful old Forrester study of Verizon that came up with our famous metric of 1.5 hours per user session saved. And we base our ROI calculations on that. I'm sure Forrester got it right, but we don't really care as much about that as we do better business decisions. And we don't know how to do that. So you mentioned percent of the decisions that we impacted, but success has many parents. Everyone will take credit for that sale. Was it because the briefing was better, because the CI team provided it, or was it because of the personal relationship between the salesperson and the account, which is what the salesperson will always say? Or was it that wonderful product positioning that the marketing people did, or that great performance metric that the product development people came up with? And who knows, really. So what are your thoughts? What are the KPIs you've seen people use successfully to measure a competitive intelligence platform's contribution and department, not the platform, the department?
I haven't ever tried to dig into that to get specific KPIs, but per the example you gave, when I read that quotation of the person from the large technology company and the approach they use, it's not binary. They're not saying we enabled that sale. We made that sale. It's that the sale became possible because that happened, and it happens that the awesome sales group actually sold. And so it's not that they're taking credit for the actual sale or whatever it was. I think it seems like I'm dodging the question, but I don't think I am. It really has to be very specific to the situation, the type of decision making or types that you're driving, and just trying to be creative to figure out what did we contribute that enabled somebody to make a decision. That's what we're doing, is we're enabling decisions. Yeah. We're not enabling the results of the decisions per se, if you see what I'm saying.
So there's a conflict here between two objectives that we have. One is to provide a consulting service to decision makers, and the other is to provide a self-service knowledge management system where users can come in and find things they need without having to interact with us. And if you're going to support thousands of users, you really have to do the latter. And unfortunately, a consequence of that is you don't have the relationship to know how many decisions you impacted. The self-service idea is in conflict a bit to the consulting impact idea.
But the consulting comes in helping to change the way that work is being done. Once people are using insights for decision making, then you're off. That's where the consulting mindset comes in, helping to change the way of working, to use more insights for more decision making.
Cinny, do you have any final remarks you'd like to share with the group?
Not really, thanks. I think it was a good discussion. I benefited from hearing the questions and the information about what y'all are doing. It's really great, and I'm very honored to have been here with you. So thank you for the opportunity.